refer to notes and kind of, look into the screen as much as possible. So firstly, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. What we're going to talk about is tinnitus, which is a relatively little understood condition even now. Despite the length of time that we've known about it, it still proves very mysterious. Only this afternoon, I had a GP emailing us, asking us for advice on how to proceed with one of their patients. So it kind of indicates that it is still mysterious, even to medical professionals, even to people like ENT surgeons. It's the one thing that seems to confuse and confound them. So I guess as an introduction, tinnitus we describe as any sound which we experience in our heads, typically, which doesn't have an external source. So, I mean, the classic example is buzzing, but it can be clicking, it can be ringing. For some people, it's music, complete segments of songs or fragments of music. It's not always related to hearing loss. For some people, their tinnitus stems initially from things like concussion or head injuries. I always remember when people ask me what causes tinnitus, looking at the website of our sister organization in the States, the American Tinnitus Association. They listed around 200 health conditions where tinnitus can be a symptom. So that, as you can imagine, makes it much more difficult for people to get a definitive diagnosis. They may know that they have tinnitus. They may be in agreement with their medical practitioners that they have tinnitus, but the underlying cause can be really difficult to identify. As I say, we often jump to hearing issues. It doesn't have to be. There can be, things like benign tumours in some rare examples that are the onset for it. I'll just move to my next point. Dealing with kind of calls and contact from people, as I have done for about 9 years now, initially as a volunteer and then working for the charity. The classic things that people talk about are sleep problems, sleep interruption, sleep disturbance, a feeling that sleep is very difficult to imagine once you develop tinnitus. It can affect concentration, obviously, if you've had a sleepless night and you go into your normal daily life the next day. Concentration can be affected, mood can be affected. There can be a major effect on well-being for people. What we try and stress is that it's possible to lead a good, normal, reasonably straightforward life, even though we have tinnitus. What we're often there to do is to support people through the initial stages or through flare-ups in the condition, or spikes as they're often known, so that they can get to that point where they either habituate to tinnitus, which is, for many people, the gold standard, the thing they look forward to most is this kind of idea of habituation and being able to live a normal life with tinnitus. One thing we try and point out is that although some people do identify as suffering with tinnitus, not everybody does.
Okay. I need to get to my emails and stuff.
I've got.
It is a challenging condition, and it can be life-altering for the people who really, really find it tough to cope with. Those are chiefly the people we try and support at the charity. And on my team, there's 3 of us currently who you'll speak to via the helpline. We might respond to you via email if you send us an email, or if you use our web chat service, you might also speak to us. So that's myself, Pat, there's Rory, and there's Sarah, as well as volunteers. A number of volunteers from all different walks of life, some former audiology professionals, some people just, normal folks living with tinnitus, who want to support to people who are at a different stage in their journey with it. So a brief introduction to Tinnitus UK. We are a national charity. We've been around for around 40 years now. We offer free advice and reassurance, support. We train professionals, so people who work in the audiology service that you might see at a hospital have sometimes come to our training courses. We support in terms of research, funding research, and participating in the creation of guidance. So an example of that would be the National Institute for Clinical and Healthcare Excellence, when they created some guidelines for doctors and medical professionals on tinnitus and tinnitus referral. We were involved in that process. It's something that we're hoping to continue and to grow. I mean, that initial work was in 2020, and it kind of came to fruition just as the pandemic was starting. So obviously there was more than enough chance for some of the things we were talking about at that point to go by the wayside a bit or get missed in the more pressing matters of the pandemic. We've recently been involved in a biobank project, which has been going on in Manchester for a little while now. The funding for that is quite an expensive proposition, so we hope to be able to keep developing that and keep it in motion. But the core idea behind that was having a UK biobank solely devoted to tinnitus, which would give a kind of a functional point for researchers and the kind of research community to be able to access biological data and make their research a lot easier to carry out. As I say, one of the projects we've had in the last sort of 5 years that we hope to continue on with. I suppose what I should cover is how we're funded, because we are a charity. So we're a membership organisation, so we're funded in part by our members who pay an annual fee and support the work we do and make things like our helpline, web chat, and the other kind of resources like support groups free to access. We also receive funds from trusts and foundations who help us run initiatives like a project we have in the Southwest at the minute to expand our support group network there. We also work with corporate partners. They help us deliver things like our annual Tinnitus Week and things like our yearly conference. I say yearly conference, it's actually taken a break for 2026 and coming back next February as part of Tinnitus Week. So rather than it being an event in September, it's going to move back a bit in the calendar. That's usually a hub for professionals in the audiology, ENT, the hearing sciences sector to come together and share best practice and share research and hopefully share understanding of tinnitus with each other. I guess if there's one message to come away with from this session, it's that support is available. The one thing that we always dread hearing from callers is they've been told by a doctor that, oh yeah, there's nothing you can do about tinnitus. You have to just learn to get on with it, and not giving any clues as to how you do that. So our message is that calling us, getting in touch with us. We'll try and support people. We'll try and signpost them to where their next steps are, because the process of getting help with tinnitus can be a bit confusing. People can be almost shut out at the outset if they're given a negative message by GPs, who, in fairness, don't always get a great deal of insight or training into tinnitus and how it relates to other health conditions. Basically our goal, our big stated ambition is a world without tinnitus. How we get there is a challenge for sure, but part of that will be increasing understanding of tinnitus, acceptance of it, because a lot of people I talk to feel ostracized or isolated by it. So I think bit by bit our goal will be to change the burden on people of tinnitus, and it's a complex task, but it's one we hope to move on and to deliver a bit more progress with over the next decade or so. Our CEO's just left us today, actually. Alex started us off on a fairly ambitious 10-year plan to change the kind of landscape of availability of tinnitus support in the UK. We've got some fairly exciting projects kind of percolating away in the background, which hopefully we'll be able to launch within, say, the next 6 months, which may start to change the balance a bit in the community about how people access tinnitus support and information. That's really the extent of the presentation that I wanted to give. I did include a bit about Tinnitus Week this year, which was a theme around live music and around the difficulties for people who not only work in the kind of music venues and who are part of the music industry, but also sort of concert goers like you and me. I think maybe that's a bit more niche than what the folks here today are wanting to talk about. So I'm happy to turn it over and answer any questions that people might have.
Pat, we have a first question in the chat for you. It's from Suresh, and he's saying, someone who has tinnitus, does it make them unbalanced and dizzy?
Tinnitus often accompanies conditions where people might experience balance disorders. So there's a really good charity that was called the Menier's Society. They've recently merged with a vestibular conditions charity. So it's often inner ear disorders where tinnitus and balance difficulties and potentially issues like hearing loss can coexist. I think if you are experiencing kind of prolonged periods of dizziness, if there is any kind of periodic hearing loss that then resolves itself, obviously it's worth going to a GP in the first instance. Although it's difficult, that is the first port of call for most people. But there are kind of conditions like Meniere's disease, which are fairly rare, but for some people there is a balance component to that. Obviously, vertigo, things like labyrinthitis sometimes. It's if it's something that's happening on a regular basis, and obviously before it becomes debilitating or it really, there are sort of audiovestibular professionals out there who can help people with the diagnosis. It's usually a case of getting to them, which is the challenge. What was the Meniere's Society, but the organisation that's now formed from it, which is an acronym that is just escaping my memory at this point. They have a really excellent list on their website of practitioners and specialists across the country that people can access, and hopefully ask to be referred to if there's somebody in your locality or in the region. They often specialise not only in vestibular and balance issues, but they have an understanding of tinnitus. So that is certainly an option if anybody wants to get in touch. Helpline at tinnitus.org.uk is our email address, and we're more than happy to answer questions. If anybody wants to follow up on that.
I wondered if Suresh, if you wanted to add anything further to your question, because there aren't any further questions in chat at the moment. So did you wish to ask anything further?
No, because I'm just asking because my wife has it recently.
Yep.
She's been having it for the last, she had it about 4 years ago, then it stopped, and then it started again.
Right.
And she has been unbalanced. She's been feeling dizzy.
Yeah.
And she's scared of driving in case
of course,
it happens. A serious thing happens to her. So she's been to see a doctor. Doctor has given her some tablets which she has to take 3 times a day.
Yep.
Yeah.
But at the moment she feels that she is getting better.
Okay, great.
With those tablets.
There's a tablet called beta histine, which is really commonly prescribed for balance disorders. It's also prescribed to people who are new to tinnitus, and it can be really helpful at managing those balance issues. There may be sometimes some dietary adjustments that can be made. That also make a difference.
Okay. Thank you, Pat, for that.
Thank you.
There's another question now from Jill. Right. How can I find a support group? What do the support groups do? How do they help?
Well, that's a good question. My friend Emily is in charge of support groups at Tinnitus UK. And there is a list on the website. If you go into, there's a category on our website called I Have Tinnitus. If you go into that section, just scroll down a wee bit. There's a list of the support groups that we have across the UK.
Good.
So some of them are in person. So you can go along every month, every couple of months. An example of that would be in Chesterfield, who just celebrated their 40th anniversary. They were around pretty much from the beginning of what's now Tinnitus UK, but was the British Tinnitus Association. So what different groups have different focuses.
Okay.
Chesterfield is famous for their poetry.
Are they? Oh.
And for kind of having sort of events and even publishing.
Excellent.
So like creativity in their case, and also walking.
Marvelous.
Like a kind of getting out and about kind of approach. Some of the other groups run by NHS audiology services or in conjunction with them. So you can go along there and be assured of having somebody who certainly understands the impact of tinnitus or the mechanics of the conditions where tinnitus may develop from. So there's different themes really. When we have the in-person groups, they tend to be a lot about giving people a chance to talk, and if they exist in a bit of isolation, they're family and friends are supportive, but maybe don't understand the impact. It's an opportunity to go along and connect and see people who look like you and are very similar, and kind of share your experience. Online groups, we tend to look after ourselves from Sheffield, where the charity is based. So we have some core groups that have been running since 2020. We've added to them over time, so we have a theme, various themed groups. So we have a group for armed forces personnel. We have a group for people with TMJ, so a temporomandibular joint disorder. which is, another one of these conditions where tinnitus is a symptom, and hearing loss may not be wholly in the mix there. We have a tinnitus and sound sensitivity support group. So for people who also experience conditions like hyperacusis, kind of elevated sound sensitivity that happens alongside their tinnitus.
Yep.
And people have misophonia, for example, or recruitment. There are various kind of subtypes of sound sensitivity. That's run by a hearing therapist.
Gosh, there's a lot of range of different support groups, Pat, aren't there? Which is absolutely excellent. I have another question that's just come in. Can I ask you it? Is that all right? Because I think I could see Jill nodding, because Jill, who asked you the question, I think, would be as pleased as I am to hear the different range of support groups that are there, and particularly intrigued with the Chesterfield poetry one, which I think is absolutely wonderful. Now, I've got one here from Jim Ewans. I don't think he'll mind if I share it with you. He says he has suffered, luckily, from a mild tinnitus for 20 plus years, and was certainly fobbed off by the GP. I learned to live with it, and it did not affect me really. I was able to ignore it, but more recently it's almost disappeared. Is this normal? Can it burn out?
I always remember, this is around 2018 or 2019 when we had a conference in London, going down, and we were sort of taking down all of the equipment to travel, to transport back up. And there was a slightly concerned looking guy who came up to us, Emily, who I mentioned earlier, and myself, and was, he'd had tinnitus for 6 months, and it had been a fairly rough ride for him.
Yeah.
He'd had a period of about a month where he was completely unaware of his tinnitus, and he was beginning to get worried about that. I think for many people that would be the dream. You wake up and the tinnitus isn't there, gone entirely. Get on with your life, It does happen. You can talk to people who call us up and they're distraught, and they feel like the sky is falling. I've just retired, or I've made plans to get married next year, and I've started to experience tinnitus, and this has made an irrevocable effect on my life. And over time, that changes. I often talk to people about something called the 4 stages of tinnitus habituation, which is, it's a really simple roadmap. It's pretty much as it sounds. It's stage 4, stage 3, stage 2, and stage 1. Stage 4 is where most people are when they start to talk to us, and they're really struggling to cope. They're not sleeping. They're incredibly anxious, maybe, experiencing low mood, really wondering how they're going to go on managing. Is this what my life is going to be like moving forward? Stage 3, things are changing a bit for the better. Stage 2, the kind of awareness is really beginning to drop quite considerably. Stage 1, tinnitus might still be there. The awareness has changed quite a bit. Maybe the emotional aspect of it, the kind of feeling of kind of fret or fight and flight has kind of departed a bit. That's quite a common experience. And that's not to say that once you get to that stage 1, that you might not have periods of time, if you're ill, if you're really stressed, if you're kind of just going through a lot of challenges, that you might get a bit of that awareness of tinnitus back. So talking to Sandy, who's one of our volunteers, yesterday, and is a retired hearing therapist. She was talking a bit about the kind of relapse or the experience that people have where they've habituated to tinnitus, and then they almost feel like they've gone backwards.
Yeah.
And they can feel.
Pat, shall I ask if Jim would like to come in?
Sure.
on the conversation, because I'm beginning to wonder, from his message, Jim, could you tell us, would you identify with the kind of 4 stages with your own tinnitus?
Well, not really. I mean, when I first became aware of it, and it was never terrible, but it was one of these whistling things, and I was able to put it in my subconscious, I suppose. So although I knew it was there, it wasn't affecting my life. But the last month or more, it took me a while to realise that it wasn't there anymore. And I'm thinking, well, obviously that's good. If it were to come back into the same extent as before, then that wouldn't particularly be a problem. But other things do burn out. I wondered if this was one of them, but I'm guessing mostly tinnitus is more of a mental thing, really, rather than an illness.
There's definitely an aspect.
I
mean, probably about 2 or 3 years ago now, there were a couple of researchers who were proposing a bit of a split of tinnitus and tinnitus distress as conditions. That tinnitus is one thing, difficulty in either accepting or coping or living with tinnitus being a different disorder, if you want to use air quotes, because I think anybody who experiences tinnitus will go through periods where it, not pleasant, frustrating, can affect your concentration. I think there is a big component to it, because obviously mood can be affected, which is where doctors often, start to talk about prescribing things for low mood or anxiety or working on stress. Why, maybe to some extent, why cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapies are suggested as potential treatments for people who are kind of really struggling with mood. I mean, there's one of the recent conferences that our CEO Alex, who as I mentioned has just left the charity, went to, was talking about, from the perspective of a neurologist and a neurosurgeon, they felt like you're looking in completely the wrong place about tinnitus. There's something to do with hearing, but the brain, the pathways, the way that information is being transported and maybe reacted to the bigger part of the issue. Whether that proves to be the case. I mean, the gentleman who's the current head of our professional advisory committee works in the neurosciences, so obviously there has to be a role there. But I guess what we'd probably say is it's a multifaceted symptom condition, however you want to determine it.
I've got a couple more questions, Pat, if that's okay.
Sure.
They're from Jill, and in many ways they're kind of linked. She's saying, can you measure tinnitus? I know you've talked about the 4 stages that people go through, but she's saying, can you measure tinnitus? If you'd like to answer that, well, then I've got this follow-on question from her.
Okay. I guess measuring tinnitus is still the difficulty. I mean, that would be where things like pharmaceutical medications start to become viable, because you can measure a symptom and treat it. What has been possible for decades is kind of mapping and kind of neurological imaging. So you can determine that tinnitus is occurring, initially in animal test subjects. For some reason, ferrets have been a popular thing. Don't ask me why. Apparently our brains work in a similar way, or our auditory systems, our brains work in a similar way. But there has been some mapping done which kind of determines that centers of the brain that are kind of firing or not firing, or responding to stimuli. So that is the objective measurement of tinnitus is kind of, it's a bit of a grail, I think, for researchers, because at that point you get into all kinds of interesting possibilities.
Following up then, because Jill's got a supplementary question, which in a way, I mean, all of us this evening have come along probably with varying ideas or varying knowledge of tinnitus, and probably have family and friends that we may know of still having it. And Jill is saying, are you as a charity looking for volunteers to help in any way, and kind of what would they do, or what could they do to help?
What could you do? There's lots of stuff. I mean, from my side of things, I'm the information advice and guidance manager. I started as a volunteer way back when, about 10 years ago. And so from my point of view, research is a big thing. I guess from the perspective of support groups, it's always great to have volunteers involved in support groups to to help facilitate, or to potentially to facilitate themselves. There are some folks who come to our office and volunteer and do some admin tasks. I'm pretty sure that some of my colleagues would be delighted to have volunteers come in and support them in the various things they do. So, for example, my colleague Ottilie, who's our Trusts and Foundations Officer, I would imagine that she would enjoy any help from anybody who's kind of got skills in that regard. My colleague Danny is our kind of commercial manager and works a lot with sort of Specsavers and kind of some of the big high street audiology firms, some of the hearing aid companies like Phonak and so forth. Basically.
Should they go via your website then?
Yeah.
If they go onto tinnitus.org.uk, presumably there's a kind of a way then that they could log the fact that they would like to help in some way. And if you knew where they were located, then possibly there's a support group that is relatively near them, or something like you said, if they have a particular skill that they could help around fundraising or whatever, they can go on and log that willingness to.
I work with a couple of volunteers pretty regularly on research, because that's where their skill sets are. One of the current volunteers we have is a psychology student, so there's kind of the opportunity there on the helpline and web chat and forums. I mean, any charity often does kind of really benefit and is kind of improved by the input of volunteers. So we always encourage people. There's a specific area on the website for volunteer inquiries, but if you were to drop an email to emilyd@tinnitus.org.uk, that'd be a good direct route.
Thank you, Pat. Well, now I think you've inspired everybody, because there's questions popping up all over the place. So we've now got Trish Greenwood. How many adults in the UK have tinnitus, and does it affect children?
Yes, on the latter point. We estimate about 7 to 8 million, and that's people with tinnitus. There's been a problem in updating that statistic, which I think is around 5 years old. Some of the data that was publicly accessible and public facing hasn't been collected in about 3 or 4 years. So updating that is a bit of a challenge. I think in some of the European countries that I've looked at, that's a similar figure. In America, I guess it's kind of quantified more in terms of hearing loss, but that number is creeping up, and it's not just kind of the classic conception of somebody who has tinnitus is somebody who's older. I mean, I'm 53. I've had tinnitus for a number of years, probably from my teenage years, actually. So that kind of falls into that cohort of young people.
Yeah.
They are maybe one of the most difficult groups to reach. Initially, because obviously we're as a charity, as an organisation, supporting people who are under 18 is a really difficult task, because you want parents or guardians involved there.
Yes.
And they're more likely to want to go and talk to a doctor or talk to a medical professional, understandably. But yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I talk to parents of children who have tinnitus, whether it's from kind of glue ear, from a hearing issue, around exam time every year. We start to get the calls from parents who are really, really concerned about their kids who are dealing with a lot of anxiety stress, or a lot of exam stress or anxieties, and their tinnitus is kind of becoming a real challenge for them. And they're asking for sort of specific support with that. If you ask this question internally about do children experience tinnitus, we'd all kind of go, nah, because there's a particular set of booklets that we produced maybe 4 years ago, which have been really, really popular with audiologists and audiology services. And yeah, basically key stage 1 through key stage 3. So absolutely, children do experience tinnitus. I guess the difficulty with data is kind of quantifying it. Because I mean, GDPR, obviously, people have the right for their data not to be shared publicly, but we know anecdotally from talking to our audiology colleagues and friends in that sector that, you know, young people, increasingly young people, so we seem to get a seasonal cohort of callers who've just gone to university for the first time, maybe have started to go out to concerts and clubs and you know, start to experience some hearing issues, or the classic kind of threshold shift where they have tinnitus after going to a particularly loud event.
So thank you.
It covers the gamut.
Yeah. Thank you, Pat. Now then, this is from Sue Peterson. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Sue, I apologise if I'm not, ginkgo, Gingko, does ginkgo help? ?
It's really popular as an ingredient in dietary supplements, which are often marketed to folks with tinnitus. If you kind of search online, you'll find a number of kind of sort of oral sort of tablets or kind of sprays that have ginkgo as an active kind of ingredient. It's a weird one because it's so popular and so ingrained in those kind of products. If you look at the kind of the research, it says that ginkgo can actually be fairly bad for tinnitus for some people. So it seems a bit counterintuitive. I have a forum member on our forum who is adamant that ginkgo is what's improved his tinnitus. So I suppose what that demonstrates is there's no hard and fast rule about anything that could improve something. I guess the difficulty with any kind of supplement is getting sort of consistent results. We a lot of the week we get calls and queries about ginkgo, about supplements that have ginkgo in them. I think the prevailing opinion is that dietary supplements are just too unpredictable. You don't know quite what you're getting when you buy something, about the composition and kind of what's included in it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right now, from Andrew Campbell, I'm severely deaf and have tinnitus. Has there been any research on the adjustment of hearing aids to reduce the tinnitus?
That is a question that I'm not going to park it exactly, but I have a couple of colleagues who have direct connections to the hearing aid world, so I probably want to go and talk to them about that. I think there are challenges with levels of hearing loss about where traditional hearing aids are effective and where you start to get into things like Bicross devices or cochlear implants, for moderate to severe hearing loss. Whether you're a candidate for that, whether you can access that service from the NHS, and whether it will be effective, because we know for some people with cochlear implants, there's the hope that it will eradicate tinnitus, and it doesn't. For some people, it seems to kind of just keep it where it is, or maybe just fractionally make it more noticeable. So I guess the innovations in hearing aids have been things like better microphones, better support for your mobile devices that make things like apps work a bit more effectively and sort of sound therapy work a bit more effectively. I think the change seems to be in making things like hearing aids more accessible in other technologies. So if you have an Apple device and you have some of the headphones or earbuds, the accessibility functions in the software now turn those into over-the-counter hearing aids. That's probably for people with mild.
Can I see if Pat? Can I see if Andrew would like to come in on this one? Andrew, would you like to?
Yes, it's been interesting to hear what you're saying. I have had tinnitus for a long time. It's different in either ear, which is intriguing. I suppose I'm habituated to it. I hear it all the time. I can't get rid of it. I know it's there all the time. I actually find it quite comforting in certain circumstances. When I take my hearing aids out, I can't hear anything. So my tinnitus reminds me that I'm not dead. It is useful.
I talk to people who talk about the tinnitus as being a friend or a part of them, that it has that similar function. They hear it and they know what it is. They're not kind of at odds with it.
Yes, I suppose I'm quite lucky because my hearing is very distorted anyway, even with my hearing aids. So the tinnitus gives me a baseline, if you like. I don't know why I am habituated to it. I know when I was about 20 years younger, it used to annoy me sometimes, really, really did. I've got over that. I don't know how I've got over that. In your work, how do you help people get to that stage where they, as you say, are habituated to it, like me?
It's different for everybody, I suppose. Like I say, if you come to it and it's the first time you've experienced it and you have no context for it, it can be really, really debilitating. It's kind of looking at tinnitus is one thing. Maybe the fear or the anxiety that you have about it is another. Your environment may be another factor. The challenges that you've got going on in your life may be another thing. Again, there can be all of these things just piled on top of each other, and one of them you might be able to kind of shrug off and cope with. the combination of things gets you to a point where you think, what do I do? So I guess what I try and do is talk to people and listen. Listening is kind of key. It's something I need to remind myself about. And that when somebody calls us, we may be the first person they've been able to talk to about it. Or they, you know, speaking to a chap in Namibia yesterday, and kind of trying to sort of navigate, because I'm in Sheffield, I'm in the UK. I don't have any experience of the medical systems and what his options are where he was, and trying to support him and just ask questions and get a sense of what his experience was when it was bad for him, when he really struggled with it, what services he'd been able to access. And he'd gone through family doctor, audiological specialist, seen an ear, nose and throat person, and kind of emerged at the end of it without any clear idea about why he had tinnitus or what he could do about it. And as was often the case, it was kind of, is there a medication? Can you recommend me a medication that I can take that's going to get rid of this or stop it? And it's a really difficult conversation to have. I guess, trying to find out what the situation of the person is, and then trying to think about what we can suggest and signpost and offer is the approach I would take.
I think Pat, the questions have kind of stopped coming through now because it's been totally fascinating. I can't see anybody, can you, Jill, with hands up or anything? So really, I would like to, before I hand back to Jill to talk about future meetings, I'd like to thank you so much. It was an area that I didn't really know much about. I appreciate this evening just how complex it is, not just the causes, but the effects and the implications for everybody, for the family, and as well as the person that's at that time experiencing tinnitus. So it's very, very good of you to spend your time here this evening with us. So on behalf of us all, I would like to thank you. I'm desperately looking for my little button that shows hands clapping, and I can't. So I'm going to clap in real life, Pat. So thank you so much. And I'm going to hand back to Jill, because I think you'll be intrigued at our next speaker that does touch on glue ear.
All right.